Welcome to the live stream. Hello, everyone. The title of today's episode is "Roars of Unheard," and so let us begin with this image of a lion in a crowd of sheep, and this lion has no idea it's a lion. It feels different in a certain community. This lion plays along as a sheep for most of its life, just standing there and seeing the ocean of white wool, until one day, non-stop after the repetitive life of a sheep that this lion is going through, the lion notices a lion, an actual lion, outside the fence, just staring at this lion. And so the lion from outside the fence, it suddenly shouts as if its roar is intense. It's like with strength. The lion outside the fence shouts and says, "Hey, lion, you lion in the middle of the sheep, come here." And so in that moment, the lion that's in the group of sheep that's been just raised by sheep and thinks it's a sheep, suddenly gets this sense of danger. He gets a sense of danger that the lion is going to attack its family, its tribe. And so it gets scared because this lion the lion in the crowd of sheep doesn't have the mentality of a lion. He thinks he's a sheep, so he's trying to fit into the crowd and the crowd says nothing. And so he just stands there. And then the lion outside the fence just is astonished that that lion is in the middle of the sheep, baffled, and he just thinks for a second, and the lion outside the fence suddenly shouts and says, "Hey, you sheep in the middle, that's taller than all of them, come here," And suddenly all the sheep notice the lion and they all kind of there's a hectic roar or something, but this lion in the middle of the sheep crowd is paralyzed. So as all the sheep run away, this lion is just standing there, the sheep lion. He feels a sort of calling, the lion that felt it was a sheep. He feels like this is a moment he needs to go. He needs to confront this. And he trusts his intuition, that lion, that sheep lion, He goes to the lion and for the first time he's face to face. And then the lion, the older lion that's outside the fence, he just looks at the lion in the fence and he says, "Come with me, I have to show you something." And he says it with such authority, that this sheep lion listens to him, and they go by to the water, to a pond, and the older lion says to this lion that thinks it's a sheep, he says, look at me, and the lion is looking at the lion and says, "Now look at my reflection in this pond." A sheep becomes a lion. In that moment, a world of lies breaks in the clarity of new truth. And the older lion notices the tears on the eyes of the broken ego, of this person thinking that he was a sheep his whole life. Suddenly realizes he's a lion. Suddenly his mind understands he has been living in an illusion of his own acceptance. Because not all illusions are created by us, but they are accepted by us. Every being accepts how their experiences have meaning, have value. And so the older lion says, "Roar with me," and he roars, a loud roar. And then comes the turn of the sheep sheep that became a lion roaring, of this new lion. And the new lion, this younger lion, roars and becomes a lion. And a new world and a realm of responsibility and natural instinct and intuition opens up to it, But this lion, who was a sheep first, has something the lions that were never sheep don't have. The lion that was a sheep and wakes up to its true nature will have sympathy, will have compassion for sheep, will not eat the sheep, will not attack the sheep, but will try to wake them up, will try to say, if there are lions among you, now is the time, now is the great stage of existence that we have all come to. Many individuals present in the same universal sector. We are children of the world. Our true parents is the whole cosmos. We have been lied to. We have been lied to not by only stardust, but by the stories that made us never try to gaze beyond them. There is a war of language going on, and language is a ruthless conqueror, especially to the child's mind. And so, the roars of the unheard is a suggestion. It is signifying that there are many realities of ability. There is so much greatness hidden from the eyes of mankind, because it lives in the hearts of certain individuals. And I am nothing compared to the vision that my mind generated at some moment in my life, where I got a vision of a potential human species that continues 10,000 years ahead. But it has transcended its humanity. It has become a master of observing energetic expression. We at some point, languages create identity, or at least give you the tools to fabricate a story of a life. But language will shift. There are states of consciousness I personally find valid that have had experiences through, where it's just geometric, it's just design based. There is no narrative to have a sort of right and wrongness to the situation. It's as if a simpler way of seeing life, where a lot of complexity is not imposed. Because the person who asks a question is a person on top of a mountain of their own knowledge. That means whenever somebody comes and tells me something I didn't know, I just kind of stare into the sky, and I just gain this sort of noble honor for a universe that does not leave its comrades behind. I found it very astonishing when I was trying to articulate, or in some sense comprehend thoroughly, a sort of philosophical exploration of Buddhism and of this concept of enlightenment. Of course, I was mainly experience-oriented, which meant that I had a certain relationship with a sense of intuitive knowing. This intuitive knowing, it was hilarious. The first thing it communicated, the logos communicated to me, was do not shape me. The spirit of the universe, it's as if I would be rude to tell you that, oh my God, people are talking to aliens, to angels, to ghosts. I would be rude to truth if I shaped it. And because I understood this life was a sort of preferenceless passage into every moment the unknown revealing a new dimension of my own knowledge. I can't tell you this enough, but wisdom only arrives when, after countless deaths of ideas on yourself, you are seen. You begin to see life's true face. And life's true face is expressionless. That means we are creatures that walk in our own worlds. That means there's, of course, this vast magnitude of material design and landscape in front of us, but aside from that, how it comes across to us is a sort of dynamic, energetic meaning generation. And so people have access to memory and imagination. So for me, I realized that enlightenment is a sort of going through a tunnel, not going through a tunnel to get to the other side. You know, it's like, why did the chicken cross the road? Because it wanted to get to the other side. You know, no, like I don't want people to be chickens. You know, I want a moment to arrive where a species looks back sincerely at its misconduct. It looks at its mistakes and it dies to the past. It sees the failure. It sees the vastness of human sacrifice and human futility. As if there have been many people who, regardless of motivated by any sort of story, whether it's scientific, religious, or whatever the person wants to paint at the time, when I realized how many lost technologies there have been on this planet, I realized there is only one manipulation going on. A manipulation to try to make people not look in themselves, not look at themselves. Children are raised wanting to follow idols that only became idols by not being followers. The world is confused, and may in a confused world a madman speak. When I say madman, guys, I mean, like, I'm not talking to you about like in regards to a certain psychoanalytical position. I mean, I'm telling you, madness was a sort of liberating effect of being free from a sort of ego. And the ego is by far one of those advanced technologies that could be manipulated. This is what magic is. Magic is locking someone into a certain ego that they think they cannot be more and they think they cannot be less, but they are stuck. And it is the purgatory of ignorance. Purgatory is only a place for ignorant beings, and ignorance is alive in every person's life, but they have to realize that at some point you're going to look at the end of the line and you're going to rush. You're going to realize that there is not enough time to live as a blind person. And when I say blind person, I'm talking about like being locked in a certain set of fixed opinions that can never change, because you don't dare to change them, and you should dare to change them. You know, this is why I remember I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and we came to this conclusion of where is society going. And I just shared this spontaneous sentence that it was as if like something I could see. And I said that I think modern society is going towards a digital realm of rebellion. And what I mean by a digital realm of rebellion is that we are going to rely on technology to come to a point where we are playing with infinite variation. And after we have reached a sort of empty infinitude of our own way of changing things, we will become tired of the self. We will become tired of the idea of the self, and that's when the civilization graduates in some sense to its collective existence. A collective existence not bound by form, not bound by forms of thought or forms of image. It's as if we will realize geometrically there needs to be no discrimination. You know? You can't say one building has less architecture value in architecture than another building. And what I mean by this is that I'm kind of taking a philosophical approach to this, because for me, Anything that didn't exist and exists is an achievement. Any effort, any failure, if the failure, if your failure didn't exist in the world and it was something new, it is not a failure. It is art bad misinterpreted. That's what failure is. Failure is a bad interpretation of art. Because novelty cannot be judged. The new cannot be judged. A new moment holds greater value than anything. I had this cousin, you know, who's much older than me, but we were all sitting at the table, and he has a PhD in philosophy and an MBA, you know, very well educated guy, you know. And someone asks him something like a deep question, and he just says what my grandfather said, as if he's that grandson that listened to his grandfather, even though he had a PhD in philosophy and concluded what his grandfather had concluded. Do you see? So I'm telling you, it was kind of funny thing, because our sometimes new experiences can define us in so much more able ways than previous experiences. So in some sense, there needs to be a coordination with ability and a realization that the only agenda is the continuity of the civilization and the graceful journey of people through time and space before their consciousness transitions through an immaterial veil. Transitions to the, you know, as if the material curtains are pushed aside and you have seen heaven always in your own eyes. I find society needs to develop a sort of greater network where a lot of people who, let me tell you what society is. Societies in any, you can consider any planet, any civilization in time. It begins with an artificial arrangement and agreement of behavior, which you need to entertain until the society is wise enough. There has been enough addition of wisdom to that society where people can be themselves, and they realize that hatred is in some sense the action of an inferior mind. And love shouldn't be blind either. There's love is a multidimensional idea. This is why in religion it's hilarious, but you know, you find the concept of love, you know, written in religion. You know, where it's as if the love of God, the devotion to God is like enlightenment of some sorts. For example, in yoga, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, a certain approach to enlightenment is bhakti yoga, which means a yoga of devotion, which means you cannot be truly devotional until you're truly honest and until you have arrived at your true nature. And every person who arrives at their true nature, this is going to be your participation in the logo's blueprint of the future. And it's very fun. It's kind of fun in a sense where you realize your intelligence doesn't just belong to you. It is a quality of this universal sector. You find yourself liberated. You find yourself as birds fly over a dark sky, and as light peeks out from the distance. We are creatures of a certain quality. We are journeyers. And as journeyers, we have two modalities of existence. Either we take the kind of here and now approach of it, which Ikkyu, the Zen master, said, the journey is my home. As if just the moment how life is happening is just enough for me to be me. But there are some people who it's not just enough for them to be themselves, because they see the potential of a self that can be more than what they think they are. And so this brings into concern two different angles of consideration. One is how far is too far, and how comfortable is a sort of non-expanding comfort. Believe it or not, I feel like spirituality was one of the first things. Was one of the, like, I was indoctrinated not into religion but into spirituality. And because I was indoctrinated into it, that means before I had an experience, it was shown to me as a validity. I I never questioned it, but I could totally comprehend how the limits of my existence don't need to be just to my sensory perception, because where is the sensory occurring? And then comes the mysteries of consciousness. Technology is a pattern. It's a pattern that can define other patterns if it gets out of control. For example, AI and talks. For example, Neil Bostrom speaks about superintelligence. You know, we have Sam Harris kind of being a person who, even though that's not his field, but finding interest to debate on the morality of the issue. For me, life is a design in your eyes, and there's two sides to it. You look at a picture and you either accept the picture, or you look at a picture and notice the greater picture developing in your mind and accept the unknown evolution of inspiration and intelligence. This is what I realized. I will never know as much as the whole cosmos does, unless I am the whole cosmos, which means it's a certain non-individual relationship of your own intelligence to yourself. You know, the words have always been a mountain to climb, you know, or a bridge to pass. That words are not hotels for someone to just live in that belief for the rest of their life. Your beliefs update based on your sense of self changing. You never have the same beliefs because you're never the same person. And if you are having new beliefs all the time, even the old beliefs, because of your new experiences and new extensions of being exposed to life, you have become a different person, then how are your beliefs so fixed? And this is the funny reality of the world. In a changing universe, it is very complex, very difficult to believe something unless it is experientially present. By the way, guys, if any questions arise while I'm giving this talk, feel free to share anything in the chat window. You know, we can have interesting conversations there. So let me get to the point of this talk in some sense. The roars of the unheard, it comes to this idea that there is a sense of self that the person in some sense is not allowing within himself. And any sense of self that a person denies within themselves, they will be open to deny in others. And this is in some sense the problem of the turbulence of this world that people go through, that they get certain experiences, and those experiences, as if the person tries to be something when they're young and then they're rejected, you know, or they're pushed aside or they fail. And because they feel they have not been given freedom, it is so much more easier to not give others freedom. So in some sense, you have to find a sense of self within you that can accept life how it is, but also be open to updating itself through an appreciation of what the unknown is going to bring into your life. I want to read some quotes from Thomas Hobbes, this man who in the 1600s had some very useful ideas to share. Thomas Hobbes says, during the time men live without a common power to keep them all in awe, they are in that conditions called war, and such a war as if of every man against every man. I'll read that again. During the time men live without a common power to keep them all in awe, they are in that condition called war, and such a war as if of every man against every man. Yeah. So what that means is, unless there is a better idea, every person's going to follow their own idea. Thomas Hobbes also says, there's no such thing as a perpetual tranquility of mind while we live here, because life itself is but motion and can never be without desire, nor without fear, nor more than without sense. Yeah, I'm going to read two more from Thomas Hobbes. All right. He says, the secret thoughts of a man run over all things holy, profane, clean, obscene, grave, and light, without shame or blame. As if the observer within is attributeless. And now the final Thomas Hobbes quote of this talk. And I find this is it's something, before I read it, I'm going to tell you, in my own life, it has this sentence, he says, I've heard it in other cultures being said differently, but it's very wise. And kind of, for example, Socrates, I guess I'm going to say that Socrates has this quote where he says, the only truth is to know that you know nothing, or something like the only wisdom is to know that you know nothing, because it's too big to assume a certain belief over all of it. So Thomas Hobbes says, such is the nature of men, that however they may acknowledge many others to be more witty, or more eloquent, or more learned, yet they will hardly believe there be many so wise as themselves. We center our lives around ourselves, in some sense, around ourselves. Once that sense of self, that primary sense of self, that individualness has stabilized enough, it can pay attention to others. But unless it is not stable, it will be in a sort of animalistic competition with the world, not just with people, with survival. Survival of the fittest, I find it's a very multidimensional concept, because people are trying to survive in many different ways, in many different situations, conditions. And so to assume oneself as the only source is in some sense, I guess, non-individualistically valid, but individualistically invalid. In certain mystical traditions, what is really can be considered an unheard truth is an empty truth. Something many people never think about in life, because they're trying to live a fulfilled life. They're trying to see it all full and filled up in a certain way. They do not see the empty page where the words are written on. And how the empty page came about requires a sort of design. And if life has a design, one can say that it also has an intelligence that started the design. So in some sense, we're thrown into this philosophical first cause argument that there must be something to start the Big Bang. But at the same time, how useful it is for us to have a certain fixed opinion on the source of the universe when it's changing all the time and it seems to be very vast? And what if the concept of things starting and ending is only valid because space seems to be eternal? It seems to be forms that break, shapes that change, lives that are lived till their end. And so it's very interesting. What is the significance of intelligence in emptiness? This is the great question. And the significance comes down to novelty and to a sort of acceptance that there's never an ending to something that continues beyond our eyes. May the roars of clarity find you.